Welcome to Chicks Who Fly, a podcast dedicated to women pilots and women in aviation. My name is Anaya, and I am your host. I am a vocalist, a DJ, and a producer, and I'm also a student pilot. I am currently working on my private pilot certificate, and while I am getting some finances in place to finish my training, I have decided to stay active in the aviation community by starting this podcast, among other things. I plan to interview and feature different women pilots and women in aviation and bring those interviews to you. And hopefully you guys enjoy the interviews as much as I enjoy spending time with these amazing ladies. Today, I get to have a conversation with Jesse Hutchison. Jesse is a student pilot based in Phoenix, Arizona. Jesse and I talk about some of the highs of her flight training as well as some of the challenges. We also share about our favorite aviation YouTube channels and podcasts. We also get to talk about the challenges that Jessie has faced in getting her FAA first class medical, which has been the biggest challenge in her flight training process. If you are enjoying this podcast, please subscribe or follow us on Spotify and on YouTube. It would really help us out in growing this podcast and getting it out to more and more people. You can also visit us at chickswhoflyofficial.com. If you have any questions or requests for any specific topics or interviews, please feel free to reach out to us on chickswhoflyofficial@gmail.com, or you can reach us through our website as well, chickswhofly.com. So without further ado, please enjoy the conversation that I got to have with Jesse Hutchison. Hi, Jesse. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I didn't find a lot of information when I tried to stalk you on Facebook.
That's funny. Go right ahead.
What are your ratings currently? Where are you at in your aviation career, and where are you located?
So I'm located in the Phoenix area. I live in the Scottsdale area. So I'm a student pilot, so I'm still working on my private pilot certificate and going to a Part 61 school in Scottsdale.
Oh, wonderful. How long have you been training?
So I started in May of this year, and so it's now November. So I've been flying for about 6 months. For a while I was flying twice a week, and then now I'm taking just kind of a breather and just flying once every 2 weeks. Yeah, so I fly out of the Scottsdale Air Park. I haven't soloed yet, but that should be coming around the pipe here pretty quick. There's been some delays, but as soon as we can get some snarls unsnarled, then I'll be ready to solo. And I have 45 hours at this point. So it's like as soon as this last little thing gets fixed, I'll be off to the races, soloing and stage checks and check rides and all that great stuff.
Awesome. Have you taken your written exam?
I have not. So I've been studying a bit at home, and then the school that I'm going to also is doing ground school. So I've been doing that too, and that's a couple times a week. So I haven't taken the written yet. I don't think I'm quite ready, but I'm getting pretty close.
Okay, cool. And you're preparing at the school that you're flying at?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. I did my preparation for the written with an online ground school, and I did pretty well. I got an 86, but now
good.
Yeah, I was happy. I was so nervous. And I helped my husband study for his drone pilot written exam, and because they have to do like the aviation weather and the airspace and all that kind of stuff. And he got a 94 or 96 or something ridiculous like that.
Smart guy. Yeah, that's a great score. 80, above 80, anything above 80 is like really, that's a great score. I would say that I'm just hoping to pass, but my instructor gave me a lot of grief for that and said that anything that I get wrong, I'm going to have to go over with the other instructors. So I'm hoping for a good solid mid 80s. I would be happy with that.
See, you'd be in the same vicinity as me. I'll totally fist bump you. So what got you interested in flying? How did that happen?
I don't have any family in aviation. It was just, for some reason, I've just always wanted to fly, and it's always sort of been a kind of a fascination of mine. I can't recall if there was, any one precipitating event. I just sort of always wanted to fly. And what was really funny was when I told, my family and friends that I had started flight training, their response was kind of funny. It was like, "Oh, really? Like, just now took you this long to finally do it?" Because apparently it was pretty obvious to everyone else that I wanted to fly. I had just never really gone out and started it. So no one was surprised to hear that I was flying. The response was just sort of a general consensus of, "Well, yeah, sure, of course you are."
Like, duh.
Yeah.
You were the last to know.
Apparently. So, yeah, and I'm glad that I did. It's definitely been enriching.
Were you always talking about it or watching YouTube videos or?
I think, some of my favorite movies are aviation movies. Like, just last night, this is kind of funny, but just last night we watched Fly Away Home again for like the 100th time, and my husband was kind of groaning, and I'm like, "What is my favorite movie?" It's like, yeah, and that's another way that pretty much everyone knew before you that you wanted to fly. I love aviation movies. My favorite movies are, I'm going to be that guy and say that I love Top Gun, just like everyone else.
Of course.
Yeah. And then Fly Away Home, and there's a couple others I can't think of right now. And it's funny, another way that my husband also, and pretty much everyone knew that I always wanted to fly, was it becomes hazardous to drive with me around the vicinity of any of the airports in the valley, because if planes are going overhead, I am looking at the planes coming down on final and not at the road, and the person driving with me will be like, "Excuse me, eyes forward."
I do exactly the same thing, so I feel you. I thought I was the only one.
No. There's a road that goes directly under the flight path of the aircraft on final approach at the air park that I fly out of, and I will freely admit I'm a bit of a hazard on that road, because as the planes are going right over your head, 50 feet above the cars, I'm going, "Wow, look," and not looking at the car in front of me.
Yeah, maybe you should invest in one of those cars with a collision avoidance system.
Yeah, I might just have to do that, actually.
Yeah, I think I might have to do the same thing. So yesterday I had someone, a friend of mine on speakerphone, who works at the Santa Monica airport, and I was driving to Palm Springs, and there was like a plane that seemed to be coming in for a landing. I was like, "That looks like a 500 foot per minute descent." And I was like, "Oh, look at this plane," and blah, blah, blah. She's like telling me over the phone, "Drive, forget the plane."
Yeah, eyes in front, not above.
So, let me ask you, what have been some of your challenges in your flight training, whether it's with the actual subject matter or something
mental, or even if it has to do with how you pay for it? What have been some of your challenges?
So I'd say the biggest one for me would be getting my medical clearance through the FAA. Thankfully, the finances have not been too terribly difficult, which is a real blessing. Just something that I've had to worry about it, but not to the same extent. So my biggest problem has been my medical certification. And the reason for that is that I took a medication for 5 or 6 years that is not allowed to be taken at all while flying. So when I started flying, I actually discontinued the medication under a doctor's supervision, of course. But when I started flying and I realized that this was just a medication that you just couldn't be on, I said, okay, I'm done. And I went to my doctor and said, I need to discontinue this medication. Will you monitor me while I do that? Because I have to fly. If it's a choice of staying on the medication or flying, I'm going to fly. And the doctor was more than willing to monitor me and see me in for regular visits to see how it was going. So when I went in for my initial visit with the AME, he had to defer my medical, of course, because if you've got a history of this medication at all, he can't just send you out the door that same day with your medical like you could with someone who has no medical history or whatever. Some people just go in and then same day walk out with the medical, and for me, he had to defer. So he sent all my information to the FAA, and then they've been processing that. So I've been waiting for about 3 months since that initial, actually it's been about 4 or 5 months at that point. So that's caused a little bit of a delay over the course of the last couple of months. I've been in correspondence with the folks at the FAA, sort of monitoring my file. Is it being worked on? And for a while I was calling every week, and I think I did that for about 6 or 8 weeks, and there was just no movement on it. And the problem with that is that you have to receive your medical certification before you can solo. So
Correct.
At the time, I worked with my instructor, and because we train under Part 61, the curriculum of training is kind of flexible. So I just worked with him, and he said, okay, well, while we're waiting for this, if you're reasonably sure that you're going to get the medical, we'll just go on to everything else, the things that you would be working on after your solo. We'll do some cross countries. We'll do a little navigation. So we just sort of proceeded as if I had already done the solo, but it was all dual training, and I just haven't gone on my solo yet.
Gotcha. Sounds a little frustrating. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. It's been frustrating, but it's just the nature of the beast with aviation. There are boxes that need to be checked before you can do certain things, and the wait has had its positives. It's like I'm going to ground school. I'm getting all this extra training. I've got a lot of extra time with my instructor to nail down the foundational skills. We've done some fun flights and things like that. So it's not been all bad, but I do feel like my hands are a little bit tied at this point while I wait. So we've had to get a little creative about what to do with me while we're waiting.
I understand. Is it a third class medical that you're working on?
I decided to go for first class because at this point, I'm still not entirely sure where I want to go with my aviation career. So I decided to just go for the first class because I knew I would need at least a third class. But if I decided that I wanted to go to the airlines or do like scenic tours or something, I was going to need a first class. So yeah, so mine is going to be a first class when it eventually arrives.
Wonderful. I actually did the same thing. And my thinking was, I'm committed to this, and this is not cheap. So if I'm going to be investing all this money in this training, I want to make sure that I can get the medical first and get that out of the way so that I can go as far as I actually want to, wherever that ends up being.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking too. And I actually kind of wish that I'd known before I started flying that a medical was required. I actually found out a couple weeks into training, and again, it's not been all bad. I've gotten a lot of really great experiences from my flight training just because of the fact that I've been forced to sort of wait for this medical.
Got it. What kind of aircraft are you flying?
We're flying Cessna Skyhawk 172s.
Oh, cool. I've flown some of those, and I think I'm going to finish my training in one of those because that's what's available at the school here. But I tried out a few different ones, and I first started in a Piper. Do you have a dream airplane or rating that you're like, oh my God, I would love to get that or do that?
I don't think I have a particular aircraft in mind. I think my goals are fairly broad. Same thing with ratings. It's like I'll pretty much go for whichever, ratings are required for those goals. And yeah, my goals are they're not really nailed down at this point. I love flying, and I know that I would like to do it for a living. I've thought about scenic tours. There's a company that does Grand Canyon scenic tours, and I've sort of looked at their website, and basically I just want to fly. And I think one of the things that has really inspired me, which is sort of helping me to narrow down the goals, is on YouTube, there's a channel called Backcountry 182, and this gentleman flies around in a Cessna 182 over the most amazing scenery, and all of his videos are cut to really beautiful soundtracks. And so what you get is these really just magnificent videos of him flying in amazing scenery with music over the top. And I actually said to my instructor at one point, wouldn't you want to do that if you could? Look at where he's flying. Look at the experiences that he's having. So it's a little bit obtuse, I think, but that's as far as I've come to really solidifying a goal at this point.
Yeah, I understand. It's funny because that's exactly where I'm at. However, I have an idea about seaplanes. I've seen these little airlines in the Maldives that do like island hopping in seaplanes, and that kind of sounds like heaven to me. So
I would agree. Yeah, I saw a video of some of it was just a short one, but a video of seaplane flying and in the tropical areas, and yeah, same thing. That looks like that would be living the dream.
I mean, they're flying in shorts and sandals with their hair down.
Living the dream.
For real. Have you ever seen, there's a couple of YouTube aviation things that I like to look at. One, I just thought of when you were talking about the backcountry flying channel thing, because this one is called, it was a TV show, I think in the UK, and it's called Worst Places to Be a Pilot, or Worst Place to Be a Pilot. Have you ever seen that show?
I have not, but I just pulled up the search on YouTube, and I will have to check that out.
Yeah, they're bush pilots in like Indonesia or something, and some of the terrain is absolutely ridiculous, and then they're working with some like very primitive tribes and interacting with them, and it's super fascinating. And then the other one that I really like that I would recommend is by this guy called Fun for Louie, and he did a world flight where he obviously went around the world in a Cessna RG. He was the passenger, but there is another aviation YouTuber that flew him around, and that looked like one of the most amazing things. It inspired me to want to like fly to Argentina from here.
Yeah, that looks like some tricky flying. I just pulled up his YouTube video too. That looks like fun. But yeah, some of those mountainous flying areas, it looks like it can get a little hairy.
Oh yeah, and they flew over some open water in that little plane. You have no place to put it down and be okay. You know, when they flew from Canada to Greenland was the first time they went over open water. Yeah, I recommend it if you're into that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I spend a lot of time watching YouTube videos of flying, and yeah, that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from. So very cool. I'll check those out.
What other YouTube aviation channels do you like to watch, or Instagram do you follow?
Let's see, YouTube. One of them is, there's Flight Chops, which is really good. I haven't seen very many of his videos, but all of them are really very informative and very instructional. And then the other one is Friendly Skies Film. And it looks like he stopped updating videos recently, but he's got a handful of them that he made while he was active, and they are really great for beginner pilots. He flies in a Piper Warrior, and the videos are all about, you know, here's me taking my friends on flights. Here's what you can do with a private pilot certificate. Here we are flying over islands, flying in formation. It's just a guy having a lot of fun making really well-made videos in his little airplane, and I would recommend that one for sure.
Cool. I know Flight Chops, but I didn't know this other one. Are you also familiar with Steve-O One Knievo?
By name, yeah. I haven't heard very many of his, or seen very many of his videos.
I like his videos a lot. They're fun, and they're well-made, and they're not instructional, but it actually helps educate you on, well, it helps educate me. I'll speak for myself. On some of the different things, like because they fly to the Bahamas and, you know, in different kinds of weather and situations. And he flies a TBM, so it's, you know, like a fancier jet for sure than flying a Cessna or a Piper.
Yeah. Cool. I'll have to check that out.
Is there any advice that you have for other aspiring and student pilots?
Yeah. I would say do some research before you start flying, before you go see your AME. Because, I mean, just me personally in my experience and the delays that were caused by me just not really knowing how the whole process worked, I kind of wish that I would have done a little research, because once you go in to see your AME, if they have to defer your medical, then they don't really have a choice but to send your records to the FAA, and then the whole ball gets rolling. So it might be a good idea to do a little prep work before you go see the ME. You know, think about your medical history and what, I'm not an AME, so this is not advice, but, you know, to think about your medical history and your medications, what you're taking, do a little research, which is pretty easily accessible on the internet regarding any medications that you might be taking that the FAA might have problems with, and just have all that done before you go in, because otherwise, if you start your training and then, you know, you get up to the point where it's time to solo and you're waiting to solo and you still don't have your medical, it's a little discouraging, and it's a little frustrating to not be able to progress. I mean, you know, we're humans. We naturally want to work, keep going forward, and to be in a holding pattern is a little bit frustrating. But again, it's been positive, and it's had a lot of great, you know, positive drawbacks, but I would recommend that above all is just get the medical sorted out. If you have no medical history, then, you know, go right in. But if you've got anything that might cause some roadblocks, then, you know, do a little research beforehand, just from my own experiences, and just from listening to other student pilots and being on the lift page on Facebook, I think it's important to realize that aviation seems globally difficult, regardless of whatever advantages or whatever disadvantages you might have. It's not easy. The studying for private pilot is difficult. Some of the material is hard to pick up, or just doesn't really come intuitively at first. And I think just from hearing the experiences of the other women pilots, I think it's important to realize that we're not quite so isolated as we think. If we're having a hard time, achieving these aviation related goals, that chances are your experience is quite common. It's the aviation human experience that, pretty much everyone has some sort of difficulty. If you've got the money, you don't have the time. If you don't have the time, you don't have the money. If both of those are in order, the weather might not be great part of the year. We're lucky out here that we have phenomenal weather most of the year. It's hot. It's really hot during the summer, but
I know. I drove through Arizona one of the 4 times that I've crossed the country by car, and I was taking a friend's car to him, and it was summer, and his car had no AC. It was broken.
Oh no.
And when I was going through New Mexico and Arizona, I looked like I had just come out of a hot yoga class. Every time I got out of the car.
Simply living in Arizona is an exercise in how many calories can you burn just by overheating in a day.
Well, I just moved to Palm Springs, so I could really.
Is it really warm there too?
Yeah, it's the desert, and it gets to 115 and 120 in the summer. Do you have a favorite moment in your training that you can think of?
Boy, that's a hard one. I've had a lot of favorite moments.
You could share one or more than one. You don't have to choose.
Yeah, there have been several. I think this is a good one. Oh, if my instructor ever listens to this podcast, he's going to laugh because he remembers this flight clearly, and we still joke around about it. So we were going out for a flight, and there was another student that hadn't been flying around in a while, so he got to back seat on this flight. So he climbed in the back, and it was me and my instructor in front. And we went out and did some maneuvers and steep turns, and then came back. And I said, well, are you guys okay if I just do a couple of turns in the pattern and get some practice in? And they were both fine. And I think the student in the back was just happy to get up in the air. So that night, I think I did 14 laps in the pattern. And and at some point, I can pretty much just stay up all night until my instructor has to take the controls away in order to get me to come back down. So we did 14 laps, and somewhere around the last one, my instructor turns to me and goes, so you ready to go in? It was like 9 p.m. at night. The guy in the back wanted to go home. My instructor wanted to go home to his kids, and it just didn't occur to me that it was time to go in or what time it was. And so we do a touch and go. We take off, and he's like, all right, so that's it for tonight.
That's funny. Yeah, the poor student in the back was excited, and by the end he must have been like, let me off.
What did I get myself into when I said, sure, let's do some touch and goes? Oh boy, you have no idea what you just signed up for, buddy.
That's so funny. You said you did some cross-country flying with your instructor. Where did you go?
We have been to Sedona, which is a phenomenal flight, especially if you're doing it in the afternoon, because if you plan it right, you're flying to Sedona at sunset. We left probably about 4 or 5 and amazing views. And the red rocks of Sedona are even redder when you're flying at sunset. And then when you're coming back, it's getting dark at that point, and you can see the lights fading, and all the lights of Phoenix that you're now facing on the way back are flickering on one by one. And yeah, the views are phenomenal. That is one of my favorite cross-country flights. If you're ever out in this area and thinking about doing a cross-country or, flying in the area, definitely go over or around Sedona, because that will, if you have forgotten why you got into aviation, that will quite likely remind you one of the reasons why we do this.
Duly noted. I definitely am going to have to do some cross country at some point. So.
Yeah, and the only thing about Sedona is that it's non-towered. So if you're used to flying at a towered airport, getting the hang of making radio calls at intervals is a little tricky.
Yeah, funny you should mention that. I started learning to fly in Los Angeles, so I flew out of Santa Monica and then El Monte and then Van Nuys, all towered airports, some of them incredibly busy. I also flew a few times out of North Las Vegas Airport, and that's actually where I did my short cross country from. We went to Grand Canyon West from North Las Vegas, and that was absolutely spectacular. And to top it off, it had been snowing in the Grand Canyon, which I understand never happens. So that was pretty special. But yeah, I haven't soloed either, just because it was so many different instructors and airplanes. I also flew a Grumman trainer because I'm thinking of buying a Grumman Tiger, and I wanted to see what it was like. And in the long run, the experience of trying out all these different planes early on is cool because you could see what the difference is and what your choices are. But it certainly is no good for your progress when you're as early on as I am. I'm actually at 22 and a half hours, and there's been a lot more on and off than you. And my challenge has been the finances. I mean, in Los Angeles, we were living in Santa Monica in a 375 square foot apartment that we were paying $2,000 a month for. And on top of that, paying for flight training twice a week. It was a lot for me.
Yeah, that sounds like a shoestring budget. And boy, that real estate prices in California, I hear, are astronomical. For that price for a mortgage out here, you could easily get yourself, I don't know, to give you a reference, our house is, I think, 1,500 square feet, and our mortgage is about $1,500 or $1,600 a month.
Yeah, that's so much better. Now that we moved to Palm Springs, we're in about 1,000 square foot apartment, and we're paying $1,400. And we want to buy some land and build a container house in Joshua Tree. So that's a project that we're working on, which is also desert, but it's gorgeous out there. Have you ever been?
I have not.
Well, it's a magical little corner of the world.
Yeah, I have not been lucky enough to get out to very many places in California. I hear there are some really beautiful places to see out there as well.
Yeah, I'd love to spend some more time in Arizona. I've also heard a lot of really beautiful things about that. Do you have any idea how long the wait can go on for your medical stuff?
I do know that every case is different. So some people have quicker results with their medicals, and other people have slower results. I'm not quite sure what caused the delay with mine, but some developments happened within the last couple of days. So I think things should be speeding up a little bit. I finally broke down and contacted the regional flight surgeon and asked some questions and managed to put a proverbial bug in the ear of a couple people. And I finally got a reply today, and that's actually what was causing a bit of the delay to get on the phone. I do have another response today from the FAA regarding my letter, and it turns out there was a little bit more information that they're wanting before finally submitting my certification. So as soon as I can get another correspondence out to them, I'm told that the process to review that and submit the medical takes a couple of weeks. So hopefully, best case scenario, I should have the medical certification hopefully in late December. But I'm hoping it doesn't take another couple of months. Worst case scenario would probably be spring.
Well, fingers crossed for you. You know, I know what it's like to want to move forward and have to sort stuff out first.
Yeah, thank you. I'm hoping for a resolution pretty quick here, and my instructor is actually leaving for the airlines in, I think, February. So there's a little bit of an impetus here to hurry, because if the medical is not here by sometime in January, then I might actually have to switch instructors once the medical finally does come, and that's kind of a bummer. I mean, you know, when you find an instructor that you like and you get along with well and that you jive with well, it's kind of a symbiotic relationship. And so the idea of having to switch instructors is kind of, I'm not really looking forward to. All the instructors at the school are great, obviously. We have some of the best flight instructors in the entire valley, and and so it's not a problem with the other instructors. It's just, you know, you form a working relationship with your instructor, and at this point I would be a little bit disappointed to have to try to form a new bond with a different instructor.
That's totally understandable. It sounds like you have good chemistry with your instructor.
I mean, we get along well. We joke around that he spends more time giving me grief in the airplane than actual instruction. Like we'll come down and be putting the plane away, and he'll go, "Oh, nice job tonight. It's almost like you know what you're doing."
How important do you find that chemistry is? Is this the only instructor that you've flown with?
I've flown a couple of flights with his brother, actually, also, who is a CFI at the same school. So there have been a couple of days where he was not available or was out of town, and so I actually did fly a couple flights with his brother. And that was nice. I get along well with him, too. But for me personally, if you're kind of a person who really thrives in, you know, your relationships with other people, then it is kind of important to have a good chemistry with whoever you're flying with. You know, if your communication styles jive, it's kind of important that your personalities get along as well. You know, you're not really going to learn much if this person's communication style just sort of rubs you the wrong way. And so I would say that I have a pretty good relationship with my instructor. We get along great. We have similar personalities. I think we have similar sense of humor, and it's been a lot of fun. And I think my flight experience might have been quite different if I hadn't found an instructor that I get along with so well.
Yeah, I agree. I've flown with a lot of different instructors. Find a combination of location and price and time of my life that works. And when I was flying the most often, I was flying in El Monte, and the instructor there was a young pilot who wanted to get his hours and go to the airlines, and he'd always make comments like referring to his favorite student, which clearly wasn't me. And
That's funny. I just tell my instructor that I'm his favorite student.
yeah, well, I joke with him and tell him, oh, you mean it's not me, and blah, blah, blah. But most importantly, I think what happened was he went away for vacation, and they gave me another instructor that my own instructor recommended to fly with while he was gone. And he was so good a match for me, and his style, his very direct and demanding way of, like, he just had high standards. And with my background in dance, when I was young, I danced professionally, and then I was in music, and I'm used to like very demanding and direct teachers with high standards. So when he came into the plane and treated me that way, I really related to it, and I really improved so much when I flew with him in just one time. And unfortunately, the other side of the coin was I realized what a bad match my regular instructor was for me.
Yeah, that sounds like it would be kind of a double-edged sword there.
Yeah, and then I found a couple other ones, one in particular that I loved, but she was too far away, and I tried to move there, and I couldn't. So anyway, I would agree that chemistry is really important with your instructor, and it's not cheap to fly. So taking control of your training and making sure that you're getting what you need is important, or you'll end up spending a lot more than you would need to if you were matched with the right person. Or
I agree completely. I mean, if you're spending the crazy amounts of money that we're spending on flight training, I believe you really do not have to settle for a situation that is not conducive to your learning, because really this is about you. This is your time to really learn the foundations. Your private pilot certificate is the time to really get the safety down, learn to be a safe, competent pilot, make mistakes and do it with an instructor that you can trust and that communicates with you in a style that works for you. My instructor tends to be very direct, that's kind of my communication style. If I'm doing something wrong, or if there's something that needs to be improved, by all means, just tell me. And so that works really well.
yeah, I understand. I think the last thing I wanted to ask you was, what's your favorite thing about flying? What makes you love flying an airplane?
I think the thing for me, I actually think there are two reasons. Well, there's a couple. There's a whole handful. I could go on and we could spend a whole nother hour going over it. But for me, it's just, there's something really undescribable about being able to fly. We're humans. We're not supposed to fly. So being in this plane and, watching yourself take off from the runway, it's like this mind-blowing experience. You can learn all you want about physics, how the plane flies, and still be amazed as you're lifting off, going, good Lord, I'm flying. How is this even possible? Flying is such a physical experience. One of our ground instructors at the school says a good pilot flies with their feet. And I almost want to say a good pilot flies with their whole body. You fly with your feet. You can, especially in these little planes, the 172s, you feel everything that's happening in the plane. You can feel it through your feet. You feel it through the seat of the plane. You feel it in your hands. You can hear it in and outside of the headset. So you're responding to all of this constant, very dramatic stimulus, hearing, sight, tactile sensations as you're flying. And I think for me, it's such an absorbing experience for that reason. All of your senses are just being bombarded by flying the plane. And if you're distracted at all, it's not going to work. You have to really use all of your senses to fly the plane safely. And so it turns into kind of a meditative experience.
I feel the same way, and I hear that from a lot of people. Even I have a cousin who's a pilot. He recently started flying for a small airline, and he says that's one of his favorite things. So you're not alone.
Yeah, no, I get down from almost every flight and feel refreshed and just, and also disappointed to be on the ground again, but mostly refreshed.
That makes perfect sense.
And that concludes the conversation I got to have with Jesse Hutchison. Thank you so much for being with us in this latest episode of Chicks Who Fly. As always, if you have any questions or requests, please feel free to reach out and connect with us through our website, chickswhofly.com. You can email us at chickswhoflyofficial@gmail.com. And please remember to follow us on Spotify and subscribe on YouTube. That will really help us when it comes to growing this podcast and getting it out to more and more people. Thank you so much for spending some time with us during this episode, and see you next time on Chicks Who Fly.